Shamima Begum should be allowed to return to the UK to fight the decision to remove her British citizenship, the Court of Appeal ruled yesterday. You're familiar with that part of the story. Begum, who's now 20, was one of three schoolgirls who left London in 2015 to join the Islamic State group in Syria. The Court of Appeal has now said that she had been denied a fair hearing because she could not make her case from a Syrian camp. However, former Home Secretary Sajid Javid, who made the decision on national security grounds last year, has argued that if Begum returned, it would then be impossible to remove her later, regardless of the outcome of the case. Let's speak with Tasnime Akunjee, who's Shamima Begum's family lawyer. Good afternoon to you.
Afternoon.
Just express, is your client familiar or aware of this news?
Well, I'm her family's lawyer, so the family are aware. I'm also aware that Shamima Begum has been made aware of the news, yes.
Okay. Where does it go from here? I mean, one has to reasonably assume that she would want to take the course of action of returning to the UK. How does that happen?
Well, at the moment, the Home Office have until Monday to apply for leave to appeal the decision with the Supreme Court. So nothing's going to change on the ground until the Supreme Court's made a decision as to whether they will even grant leave to appeal. And if they do, which is likely, then they'll have a hearing then in a few months' time, and these issues will be hashed out then. Until that happens, there won't be any real change on the ground.
Okay, so like so many areas of the law, as you're more familiar than me, it's never a short, swift process. There's still some way to go, perhaps, on this. In terms of where she is, Shamima Begum is right now, and her own disposition. We've seen various interviews over the last couple of years where she has talked about coming home. Her family would assume, want her home. What, as far as you know, Tasneem, has been the latest communication in that respect?
Well, she's engaging with her legal team as far as she can. It's very spotty, the communications, and she's continuing to challenge the then Home Secretary's decision to strip her of citizenship. So that's a clear indication that she does want to come back. While this process happens, then that's where her intentions lie. The family have always been tasked, or they tasked me with trying to help her to return, to get her away from ISIS, to get her back home into safety. What happens after that is a matter of that will be for the courts, really.
Yeah, I mean, you have to kind of assume the process of getting out of there isn't particularly straightforward.
Well, no, it can be. We've had three British children who were made orphans, and the Foreign and Commonwealth Office took some measures to have them returned. And from the date where their plight was all over the mainstream media to the date when they were back home with their grandparents was within a matter of a couple of weeks. So it's quite easily done if the will is there.
Are you able to tell us then roughly where she is? I don't mean the specific location. I mean, what sort of camp or situation is she in? Is she still connected in any way with Islamic State, as far as you know?
Well, no, she's certainly turned her back on that. She was at Al Hol camp initially when Anthony Lloyd sort of did the interview with her. And Al Hol camp is a very, very dangerous place where there's little resourcing around safety of people there, and ISIS narratives reign supreme. They're pretty much vigilante groups there. Because she spoke to Anthony Lloyd, she uncovered her face, and she spoke in slightly disparaging terms, ever so slightly, about ISIS. Her life was put at risk, and the SDF, who are the people who run the camps, made the decision to move her away from Al Hol and into Al Roj. Al Roj is another camp some distance away, but it's smaller. It has about 2,500, 3,000 people in it, and it's easier to manage, and therefore they maintained her safety to a degree by moving her from that first camp there. But since then, we've seen other interviews with her, and she's quite clearly progressively moved away from the position that was expressed in Al Hol.
And what about her family back here? What is their take on this whole story, Tasneem, from
Oh,
when it happened, their view on what their daughter did, and where they are today on this?
well, it's a very it's a very painful thing for them. As I say from the very off, this is their daughter, their sister, who ran away from home, following a cohort of three other girls from the same school. So this is for them, it's a runaway child who then finds herself in a group that's the most hated group on the planet, really. Those issues are under advice. They've been told not to address those at the moment. Those are things that they should think about once Shamima's back and in safety. It wouldn't serve her, Shamima's, or their purpose really to have that all dealt with now. Really.
But I mean, in terms of what that would do, your daughter goes off to join a terrorist organization. We are aware from interviews and the terrain and from other evidence of where she is, the kind of, if not directly involved, but certainly very much connected to what was going on out there, killings and torture and all sorts of other things. I mean, this is hard for a family to square, one has to assume.
No, absolutely. So, they were very much they tasked every professional that they could get a hold of at the time to try and help them get their daughter away from that situation. That's what any
Did they have any idea that she was
No.
mixing or flirting with this ideology?
So the problem with it all was that it appears that the radicalization process took its course very quickly over a matter of weeks. The first girl who was involved in this, who was radicalized as the pioneer, was a girl of very similar name, Shamima Begum, and the other three, Amira Abbas, Khadija Sultana, and Shamima Begum, they form part of the sort of coterie of her friends at school. So that girl was radicalized enough that she left in December 2014, and then managed to encourage the other three to come over. There was even more who were sensitized to this.
Sure. I mean, a lot of people hear this, and I appreciate that as a lawyer, this isn't for you to question, or you take the legal route and you're representing based on a legal background, of course. But a lot of people scratch their head and think, how could you not know your 15-year-old daughter had been radicalized to such an extent she left Bethnal Green and legged it to Syria to join a terrorist organization? I mean, there's such a thing as taking your eye off the parental ball, but this is in another league.
I mean, that's a very important question. And the deeper question is, well, how is it that the police, the counterterrorism officers who were actually speaking to Shamima Begum about her friend who'd left in December, they were speaking to her in February. How did they not know when counterterrorism officers are actually dealing with that very issue with the same person?
So it's the police's fault?
Well, no, it's the school didn't know, the police didn't know, and they were the ones.
Well, these are her parents. This is a close family, as I understand it.
Well, her father's in Bangladesh and is estranged from the family. The mother is, on her own, raising the other kids. And this process, frankly, this radicalization process took place at school. And if it happened in school with her school friends, and the school didn't know, then actually the mother and the family are in a lower position in terms of knowledge than the point at which the radicalization took place, which was in the school itself.
And what do you say? I mean, I appreciate, Tasneem, that this is a Route 1 question, but what is your response when people say, this person should, anybody that's been radicalized and willing to go over and fight for such lethal ideology as Islamic State should never come back to this country?
Well, that's foisting the problem, our homegrown problem, on a bunch of very innocent people who are the Kurds in the region of Syria. So they have less nexus with Shamima Begum, who is a British citizen, and they're the ones that have spent blood and treasure in fighting ISIS and died for fighting ISIS, and yet we are dumping our problem onto them. And the last people that are able to and should be dealing with our problems is the very people that we've used as allies and discarded after we don't have any use for them, which is the Syrian Defence Force.
And what do you say to people who worry that if she does return to this country, she will simply disappear? Other people have done that, of course.
So simply, if she were to return to the UK, our security services are monitoring at least 400 people who have returned without any sanction. Some of those people, Sajid Javed himself admitted in Parliament, were male fighters who weren't of insignificant risk. So the fact that those people are being monitored and successfully, and their danger mitigated, the idea that a 20-year-old now girl who's predominantly spent her time as a housewife in a nasty part of the world, if we can't mitigate the risks against her as the fifth biggest economy in the world, well then frankly we might as well open the doors and be taken over by Putin, really.
Yeah. Well, would you get bail in a situation such as that?
Well, it sort of depends. There are two routes really for the Home Office or the state to look at. One is whether or not criminal sanction or accusations will be brought. There's a question mark over that, but she could be arrested and obviously would probably be denied bail, so she'd be incarcerated. But there is another route, which is the TPIM order route, or terrorism prevention orders, which are civil orders, but they are effectively like under house arrest. They limit your ability to speak to other people or the press or meet with people, and they limit your ability to communicate only with family or with healthcare professionals and the like. So there are people who are on those orders now, and they work relatively successfully.
And just a final question from your own perspective. I mean, do you come at this because you happen to be a lawyer and you were the guy available for this next case on the kind of cab rank system, as it were, or do you come at this because you feel strongly about this particular case?
Well, no. It's because I gave my word to a family, really, 5 years ago. I was approached by a family, asked to help with the complexities of them losing a daughter to, in the context of terrorism. I have some experience with terrorism law, and I gave my word to them that I'd help them bring their daughter back as best I could. And the other families involved in this, their daughters are dead. So this is the last girl whose family I gave my word to, and when that is over, then that is my duty discharged.
I mean, some lawyers may have just said, I'm not going near this one. I mean, this is just too hot to handle legally.
Well, I think that would be a disservice to lawyers, really, in that we are supposed to fearlessly defend our clients, and the operative word is fearlessly.
It doesn't bother you at all. I know, again, I do understand that this isn't for lawyers to make those kind of judgments, and you are talking about the rule of law, not about the morality or the ethics of a particular case. But is there part of you at all, Tasnime, that thinks, why am I doing this? This is somebody that went off to Syria of their own volition, joined an organisation mixed with murderers and terrorists on a daily basis, appeared to enjoy it, and when it going got a bit tough, cried and wanted to come home. Does that not bother you at all?
Well, the deeper question for me is that this case sort of represents far more important issues than just one individual. It represents the idea that we now have a two-tier sort of citizenship system, which is very troubling, where if your parents hark from a different country, then even if you're born here, the quality of your citizenship is less than the quality of another person's whose parents were born here. That troubles me deeply, and that is fundamentally an issue to do with the rule of law. In terms of what part of me is bothered by the backlash from this and the headache that comes with this, well, that part's called my wife. But I take on board what she says about things and make decisions about that too.
On that point, thank you, Tasnime Akunjee, who's Shamima Begum's family lawyer, with us.